Allora, Martin Charter è direttore del Center for Sustainable Design del UCA, University of Creative Arts, e ci farà una lecture su innovazione e sostenibilità. Siamo un po'... we have a little Italian time. Abbiamo un piccolo ritardo accademico, ma siamo pienamente in tempo per sentire con calma la sua relazione e poi per fare eventuali domande.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay over there? So what I'm going to do is really give a bit of an overview of issues looking into the past to help us look into the future. And I come from something called the Center for Sustainable Design within the business school for the creative industries. So we believe we're the first business school focused on creative industries. So if anybody's interested, please come to see me. I also have a book called Designing for the Circular Economy. So given all the conversation this morning, that may be of interest. And I had a comment for the leather industry before you run away, but maybe I'll make it anyway. So, which may be an opportunity or threat for you, but if you don't hear it, you don't know it. So we start back in 1987 when we had the emergence of the definition of sustainable development, and this was put forward by by Grohart and Brundtland, and this really was looking very much at future generations in many ways, and I'll come back to that as a theme in my presentation. If we fast forward to 1992 and the Earth Summit, which I was fortunate to be at, we saw the first real corporate engagement with business sustainability. And we started to see a greening of...
Può usare questo? No, you can use this one.
Is that better? Is that better? Yeah, okay. Oh. So we had the first sort of greening of, the emergence of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and we started to see, let me check my slides are there, so a greening started, a first greening wave, if you like. And what we saw within that was the sort of recognition that products were important. 80% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design stage. And we see many terminologies emerge over the last sort of 20, 25 years, and now standardization emerging in the area. But of course, it's not as simple as that. Most solutions that are on the market are a combination of products and services. So around about 2000, we saw a lot of projects starting to tackle this. And I'm really fast forwarding here to get to the future, to get to the present, to get to the future here. So 2000s, this very much was, in many ways, the decade of climate change, where we saw massive media interest, discussion around climate change adaptation, and resilience emerging. 2008, we had the economic crash, and we saw an increased discussion over what economic development might look like, and a re-emergence of discussions around waste. And then it was very much around that 2000s term, we were looking at terms of resource efficiency and resource productivity. But around about that time, we started to see increasing concern around access to critical raw materials, commodity prices, etc. And then sort of around about 2010, this is quite a useful tool from Google Trends. I plugged in the word circular economy. And really from about 2011 to 2012, we started to see much more significant use of the term circular economy. So in that sense, it's a relatively new term, although many elements, as were discussed before, are part of the broader picture. But the first law covering circular economy was passed in China, Circular Economy Promotion Law in 2008. So really the term has really started to emerge, recently. But China is not the most advanced in this area. One of the most advanced is the Japanese. And they've really been driving, what is in effect circular economy, because they had no natural resources. But they've been quite quiet on the issue, but they're now entering the discussion, and I haven't got time to go into that, but the Japanese are entering the discussion. So 2015, back end, November, December 2015, very important benchmark. We had the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs. We had the Paris Accord, but also we had the launch of the first comprehensive circular economy policy process in the world, the Circular Economy Action Plan, that is now being implemented by the Commission, and they are now looking at a Circular Economy Plan 2.0 next year, and have been doing a lot of policy work behind the scenes. That then led to a number of national plans emerging, looking to the future, particularly the Dutch and the Finns. And the Finns also kicked off something called the World Circular Economy Forum, that is a forum of 1,000 decision makers that rotate between Helsinki and other places. And last year it was hosted by the Japanese. Back to Finland. Where's it going next? Maybe Italy. Maybe in the region we were just hearing about, maybe. But importantly, to transition towards a more circular economy, we need to design our systems at every level. And in my view, touching on the first speaker's presentation, it's a conversation about value retention and value creation. It's absolutely not a conversation about waste. So it's about how you create and retain value in economic and social systems for as long as possible. And it's very much about the use phase. It's how you get the material in products, components and materials back and extend, the value of within those products, materials and components. So it's not about the end of life at all. Materials recycling is much further down the line, in my view of what product circularity is, much further down the line. So 2019, I think you will recognize this picture. This is what a lot of us feel throughout Europe. We have our problems, big problems in UK at the moment. I know you have some challenges in Italy at the moment. So it's a time of, I would say, relative chaos in the world level. There's a lot of uncertainty around. And if we look at sustainability, it's very important to have a perspective on things. The 2000s was all about carbon, climate change, and many organizations, honed in and focused purely on low carbon climate change. We're perhaps seeing at the moment a focus particularly on circularity. But it's very important to keep that broad picture out there and not just get sucked into, one particular theme, if you like. So the next issues will continue to be climate change, circularity, access to raw materials, resource scarcity, but also water, access to water for production and for human consumption. So things go in waves, and we need to recognize those waves. And I believe we're just entering a fourth green consumer wave. First wave was the 60s. The second wave was the late 80s with various scientific discoveries, the launch of the Green Consumer Guide, and also the third wave was around carbon. I had that as well. And then this fourth wave is really being, driven by that girl, 16-year-old girl, who decided to have her personal strike. Now, and this was really, it seems amazing, just less than, or about a year ago, I think on the streets there was 7 million a couple of weeks ago. So going back to youth. So this fourth wave is different and it's being driven by youth. And the millennials have a lot more concern about these issues. And of course they are incredibly savvy with social media, which the message is coming out. So if you can think about those grassroots emergent movements not just on climate change, but also on the gun lobby in the US, these are driven by citizens and individuals. So this is maybe the M's, the millennials are about the, raising awareness of the issues, but maybe the Z's are about doing something. So there's a change going on, and I was just reading up about Generation Z this morning, and Generation Z feel pissed off. They don't just feel pissed off about climate change, they feel pissed off about the economy. So there's something there about when people change their behavior. So we have seen, the climate change process. We see now in the UK and elsewhere this extinction rebellion group that are much more about being on the streets. And that's sort of multi-generational. And this sense emerging in different parts of this climate change emergence. Greta Thunberg into the UK Parliament, into the World Economic Forum, access to decision making. So we've got another wave of climate change emerging, but we've also got another wave emerging around ocean marine plastics, driven by high-profile documentaries that are showing, the extent of the problem. And there's a big question going on around the use of plastics. Some of it is a bit, so I think we need a balanced discussion here. That's what I'd say for the moment. But in many areas, particularly in, it's okay, thanks. Particularly if we look at ocean marine plastics, there's a real poor understanding of these issues. For example, and again, I haven't got time to get in today, for work we've been doing on the fishing industry and fishing nets, there are some studies saying that fishing nets that are primarily polymers, 3 types of polymers, could represent between 10 and 70% of overall marine plastics. But it's showing the range of the lack of knowledge. That's pretty bad. If you can't identify, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And if that issue is estimated between 10 and 70% of the problem, we've got a big issue. We still don't even know the extent of the issue. So this pressure building in the system has led to the Commission passing the Single-Use Plastics Directive about, April, around about April. Essentially, there's going to regulate the use of single-use plastics, including fishing nets as well. But within these elements of circularity, we're also seeing new innovation emerge. And that's both in the biological system and the technical system. And a very interesting Italian company, Aquafil, have developed this very innovative process to de- and repolymerize nylon. And they claim they can get infinite lives out of the nylon. It's quite a secretive process. They don't talk about the byproducts of chemical recycling and the energy use, but it's there, it's real. There's a vision by Mr. Bonazzi, the director, invested. He claims 20 million, so it's quite significant there. And then those second life fibers are going into swimwear, carpets. So they had first mover advantage from a business point of view, from the vision. But also we have really interesting things going on, and I will come to the leather industry thing just in a minute, that we've got fishing nets going to skateboards now. This is collected in Chile. We have other innovators emerging. So this is a company who's an ex-Apple employee. They produce high-quality tutorials showing you how to fix your products, and then essentially the business model is to sell the tools and equipment to repair your products. On the bio side, we're starting to see, re-envisioning waste as value. So this is a company in London that collects waste coffee grounds and now is producing briquettes for fuel. And this is the interesting one I wanted to ask the question on, about vegan leather. Is this an opportunity or threat for the previous organization's vision, particularly with the new wave moving from vegetarian to veganism? And, now this is Pinatex, that's from pineapple. So this is, I didn't even know vegan leather existed, 6 months ago. But what we're seeing is, because particularly of some of the the issues arising, coming together, we're starting to see some of these sort of R&D projects now getting serious interest, because also, for a range of reasons, a lot of pressure moving through the supply chain in the fashion, clothing and apparel sector, driven from all sorts of different directions. So is this an opportunity or threat for regions such as the former region? And could you co-collaborate with agricultural sectors, for example, to come up with substitutes, you know, looking into the future? You've got your existing business, your existing sector that employs people, but maybe other things for the future. Anyway, what we're starting to see is also what I would term grooved approaches starting to emerge from some of the large companies. So Philips, they have now changed their approach. They have a very well grooved approach to eco-design, and they've changed that now to bring in circularity. It's a lot of talk about circular economy from a corporate perspective. It's much tougher to do it if you're going to integrate it into large organizations that have many business divisions that operate internationally. Very tough to transition your model. So you have to start somewhere. So a lot more talk than action at the moment. In terms of implementing circular economy, there is a standard that we worked on in the UK, and now the emergence of an ISO standard starting on circular economy. So looking to 2030 outwards, we have a range of mega trends emerging. And those mega trends, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, in a study in 2017, suggested there were 5 mega trends: urbanization, climate change and resource scarcity, shifts in economic power, demographic and social change, and technological breakthroughs. And this was even more tightly encapsulated by an excellent book called Thank You for Being Late, which really brought this back down into 3 core trends: technological acceleration, globalization, and environmental pressures. And the difference compared to the past is all those trends are accelerating at the same rate. And my feeling is we're moving into a new futurism. I think futurism was an art movement that started in Italy, actually. So this was, you know, see, everything's connected. Everything's connected. So this is a new sense of change, fast change. And time is compressing. We've got less time to do more. Everything's more connected. We're generating more and more data, but how do we transform that data into information, to knowledge? And that's only going to continue at an exponential rate. Growing concerns around climate change, circularity, water going to become a key issue. But if we're thinking about shifting to 2030 to a low-carbon circular economy and society, we need to build that infrastructure. And that infrastructure is not in place yet. So as we've got the shift towards electrification, electric vehicles, and the goals emerging there, we don't have the charging points in place. So we haven't got the infrastructure. You know, as we're talking about all these new social and business shifts towards remanufacturing and repair, we don't necessarily have the infrastructure yet. So how are we going to build it? A remanufacturing factory looks different from a manufacturing factory. Certain things may need to be completed by civil society and not by business, and how that works is different. So key issues is how are policymakers going to adapt to this changing agenda, when perhaps they're not really in touch with it, particularly with the, you know, they may be in touch and responding with rhetoric, but do they understand the real change that's happening? The other element of this is business models. How are business models going to change? Because you're not going to shift a large company's model towards circularity unless there's a major opportunity or a major threat. Why would you do it? So there's a lot of talk in the literature about shifting towards circular business models, but why would you do it? Much more of the innovation I see is going to happen from the startups. But still, the startups will have challenges with how they get their funding and how they commercialize. So how do we develop new crowdfunding and other techniques to stimulate the startups? Materials innovation. How do we develop those smart materials that enable us to disassemble products? And again, that infrastructure, that I mentioned before, how do we build that perhaps in public-private partnerships? On the technological side, there is a paradigm shift going on, was mentioned previously, the shift towards Industry 4.0, the whole series of enabling technologies that are data-driven that will take us in a very different direction, from robotics to big data to 3D printing, etc. So how is this going to connect to the low carbon and circular agenda? But before, as I say that, we're already seeing it. Apple are into their third generation of disassembly robots that they claim on certain iPhones can disassemble a product in 11 seconds. So if we've been using robotics since the 80s to make stuff, but what about to disassemble and upgrade stuff, But I think the other area that is not being discussed that I see happening is what I'm calling reindustrialization 2.0. It's much more decentralized and is about making, modifying, and fixing. This is grassroots innovation. And we're starting to see, publications like Wired pick this up and a range of other organizations. But I believe there are several trends behind this, but I'll pick up two. And thinking about people, generally citizens and groups of citizens, making, modifying, and fixing. It's the emergence of online videos. For some of us in the room, it's quite new. For some of you in the room, it's what you've grown up with. But there are many videos that are there are a mix there, but it's showing you how to make and modify and fix. It's not long manuals, so people can pick it up quicker. So that's one trend, the advent of online videos showing you how to make, modify, and fix products. But also the emergence of places and spaces to enable making, modifying, and fixing for citizens. We've got Fab Labs that emerged from MIT. We've got maker spaces that are slightly more informal than the Fab Labs, and these are also growing. And a recent study, a European study, it sounds like by an Italian, Paolo Rossa, I think for the European Commission in 2017, showed this sort of, clustering of the new types of places and spaces for making, if you like, and modifying, particularly in France, Germany, and Italy. And there's a little bit of a grayness in some of the definitions of these things. So you also got the emergence of so-called hacker spaces that are not hacking in the sense of coding hacks, but they're more about hacking and modifying products, particularly in the electronics sphere. Much more male-dominated, where it's more gender-neutral in the making space. But these are more informal, that have really been essentially to do with experimentation. But now we're starting to see, companies and startups coming. But in the other element of this, we've also seen the growth of repair cafes. And these are social innovations. Approximately 80% of these are in Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, and France. And essentially, they're civil society and citizen-driven initiatives, essentially to repair products. I know a bit about this because I participated in the first 3 global surveys on this, and I set up the first UK charity in this space. So we've run 53 sessions already, and we've got and part of this is about impact. I'm bored with somebody who's been involved with sustainability since the late 80s about rhetoric. I want to see impact and action. So we've had 2,500 people through our doors. We've nearly well over 1,000 repairs now. We have a repair rate across 53 sessions of 65%. Even though those products are not designed for repairability, what I learned is the amazing skills that are sitting in the community there from retired or semi-retired people who are still very active and they want to do stuff. And so there's an amazing resource there that if you can tap into them, particularly in this space that we're seeing. We've the other figures there, diverted 3 tons of weight, which is about 27% of carbon. And what we also do, which is probably pretty unusual for these 1900 repair cafes, we also identify how much we're saving for the citizens through repair. So by citizens not having to buy a new product, it saved them £82,000. So our next major celebration is when we hit 100,000. So this is numbers, this is impact. This is not fake news. This is real. And we have this going on. We have intergenerational people working, intergenerationally people working on fixing a product. And we've even now moved, in a sense, into the next sphere of this, where we bought a 3D printer, and we've undertaken our first customized repair. So this was quite a complicated lamp. One of our guys, and there was a problem with the fixing there. What he then did was to reproduce, he scanned the problem, created a design file, and effectively fixed the product through 3D printing, through customization. So again, you can repair using 3D printing. And also what he did, and we've got some amazing people in our repair cafe. We had a board of trustee meeting on the Thursday, and we said, he said to us, maybe I can produce a tool. So on the Saturday, he turned up, he'd made a clamp, a tool for our repairers using a 3D printer so it's amazing the quality now of the 3D printing. It's still slow, but the quality is amazing, even at quite a cheap price. This is what we found. So I think we're one of the first to have started to think about this link of repair to 3D printing. So again, as I move towards the end here, repair cafes as an example, a practical example of circular economy, a real example of circular economy, are about repair, but it's also about community and skills and the social dimension of sustainability. And that provides a very strong community bond. So we have like a 98% satisfaction. That's not 100% of people through the door, but people enjoy it because it's a good atmosphere. So looking to the future, I ran my 22nd Sustainable Innovation Conference earlier in the year. And one of the key things that emerged from that was a strong sense of what future we want to leave, what world we want to leave to the future generations and ourselves. So there's something happening, there's something going on at the moment. And a feeling that there's a lot of things bubbling up from the grassroots and changing. And you can think, Extinction Rebellion, you can think Greta Thunberg, you can think about other things. And a sense that a lot of on a national political level, there's, a lot of, rhetoric and discussion about these issues. And in a sense, civil society and others may be moving in a faster direction to the mainstream politicians. So something's going on there. And just in closing, I've developed some thoughts on what I term 15 C's, 15 C's, therefore trends for the future, in this idea of moving towards a more, sustainable 2030. So what is going to be the role of citizens as we start to see perhaps this ability to make, modify and fix? And also we're seeing things like the climate change protests going on. What are the implications over the next 10 years? Something's happening there. If you really want to, you can make all sorts of products, and it's not, from my experience now, it's not what I heard termed in the early phases of 3D printing. It's not the crap jet. It's not rubbish products. You can produce really good quality products quite quickly with equipment at a very decentralized level. Consumption. So first C is citizens. The second C is consumption. The millennials are experimenting. They want access, not necessarily ownership. They're happy to share. So there's some changes, mobility systems rather than owning cars. So there's something going on there. Again, if we're going to develop these more low-carbon circular products, services, and systems, we need better systems to get ideas to the market. And key part of that, particularly in the startup phase, is how we get new forms of funding in place to initiate those ideas and then to accelerate those good ideas. So commercialization. Cities. We're going to see increasing power of cities around the world, particularly in places like China and India. Big moves to urbanization. Climate change and carbon, decarbonization. There is now a shift globally happening around electric vehicles. And there are targets now emerging, billions being spent. So we're seeing that also interlinked with, you know, the emergence of discussions around smart cities, for example. And there's you know, all these things are interlinked. Circularity, you know, we've had a lot of discussion. We're not seeing the Commission going backwards on policy on this. We're seeing more and more national programs emerging. So circularity in its various forms is not going to go backwards. Computation. So we're going to see more and more impact of the so-called Industry 4.0. It's driven by that data manipulation in that sense. And increasingly, we're going to see technology in more products, and increasingly, people will need more coding skills. So people who traditionally didn't necessarily know how to code will need to code, such as product designers and developers. Creativity. How are we as human beings going to exercise our creativity individually and collectively in open source manners to tackle some of these big challenges? But on the other side, we need to go back into our left brain and look at critical thinking. C, critical thinking, how we probe and get through fake news. How do we question more? And that's cross-generational. Connectivity. The world is only going to continue to become more connected, and that's why some of us in the UK think we're absolutely moving in the wrong direction from the Brexit perspective. It's totally the wrong direction from a global perspective. Collaboration. We're going to need to collaborate across different countries, you know, groups, disciplines. How do we manage that when often we're actually in our silos, particularly in a government sense? Convergence. How is this going to bring together? Are many of these issues are going to bring different things together, and how are we going to manage that convergence? Customization. As I gave the example of the repair cafe, increasingly with the power of the technology and with the data, we're going to be able to customize things, but what will that mean in terms of broader sustainability? And coming right to the end, we as human race and within our countries and disciplines have amazing capabilities, but actually are we leveraging them you know, well? You know, how efficiently, effectively are we doing that? So, you know, that's another, you know, how are we going to utilize all the knowledge and strength, some of which we may have forgotten. So, for example, in our repair cafe, we see people they're forgetting how to sew. So we get a lot of clothes coming in for people to be, you know, sewn, because those skills are going for a variety of reasons. And just moving to the end, you know, what is that compass to 2030? You know, is there a compass? Should there be a compass? Will that be the SDGs? I was very skeptical when the Sustainable Development Goals came in, as somebody who's been in the area, but increasing policymakers are, you know, thinking about this, and a number of large corporates. So, looking to the future, you know, it's up to us, you know, ourselves, to take the, you know, our own steps in the direction that we think we wanted to go. And going back to the beginning, the definition of sustainable development, and looking at the, you know, the future generations, it's really quite significant that this fourth green consumer wave, or this fourth wave, is driven by a 16-year-old. But also incredible how within a relatively short time it's actually moved from from awareness to interest to action to people on the street. So this is action. So something's happening, and it's already led to change in policy, access to decision makers. So thank you very much, if I get to there. And if I have any questions, or if you want to buy my Designing for the Circular Economy book, please let me know. So arrivederci.
Grazie professor Charter, grazie molte, e apriamo la discussione se ci sono domande o interventi. Anch'io ne ho una, ma preferirei cominciare a sentire la platea, e anche se da parte dei nostri rappresentanti di Santa Croce sull'Arno c'è una risposta sul suggerimento o pericolo del cuoio vegano di cui ha parlato. Prego.
And ask one question. A new philosophy now is important, the Calvinism. More trading, more money, near to good. And it's important to trade in the goods. And what do you think about the philosophy of the Theodore de Veblen, can American economists to live in at the end of the 19th century? Because new Rick, I need you to explain with the good, excellent good. I ask, what do you think a new philosophy of the new world?
Let's collect 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Ci sono altre... Allora, c'è una platea molto giovane, chiamati in causa, se avete un intervento, delle domande da fare, approfittatene in questo momento. Vorrei anch'io fare una domanda al professor Charter. Se ho capito bene, la sua impostazione dà molta più importanza, sottolinea molto il ruolo della partecipazione e delle comunità, delle collettività, ed è un po' più scettico sulla capacità delle imprese, soprattutto di quelle tradizionali, di cambiare il loro business model. E mi chiedo se ci sono delle spinte che invece, cioè in quali casi invece l'impresa è spinta a cambiare il proprio business model. Forse anche la professoressa Gusmerotti ci può dire quali sono le imprese che più si rivolgono a voi per inserirsi nel percorso dell'economia circolare. Quindi questa è la mia domanda: società civile verso impresa tradizionale, quando queste due cose si possono incontrare.
Okay, maybe I'll have a go, and then others can if So a new philosophy. I didn't entirely understand what everything was you were saying, but I think we are at a point where we have technological acceleration. We now have this civil society movement on, the next generation being pissed off about many things. And also part of Brexit and part of Trump was people being pissed off as well. And that's very much within that, thank you for being late, but people wanting to put the brakes on and look backwards. So we're seeing, almost this divergence in a number of countries and societies about people who are really comfortable with looking forward and really embracing that change, and some really wanting to put the brakes on and go back to when times were much more comfortable. But the reality is change is constant, and change will be accelerated by technological innovation. It's whether the current wave of interest driven by Greta Thunberg leading to other things is going to continue, whether it will fizzle out or whether it will come again and stronger. So this sense of a building pressure. But I think the difference there compared to the last waves is just the power of social media, to get the message out there. And we've seen it on a negative sense, in my personal opinion, with people like Trump, but you can see it in a positive sense as well. So for everything, there's equal and opposite reaction. So, but there's something in there about, how we, embrace our creativity and also how we question as well. So, maybe this is a new, I think the Commission talked about something like this new, maybe 5 years ago, about this new renaissance. So there's maybe this new, this new future. But I think we have to be careful about marginalization of the old and the young, particularly a lot of the millennials. There's a lot of challenges going on between 15 and 20, around the world. So the social dimension of the technology. So, it's somehow how we, embrace this in a positive form. So that's a bit of a general comment there, but I have a sense there is change happening. Always change does happen, but this is a different sort of change. I'd say in terms of, let's say the commercialization of the circular economy, the reality is, things like repair, materials recycling, refurbishments aren't new, but the systematic integration of circularity into business models, processes, and products is new. But it's tough at a large company level to do that. How do you start? Do you start with a pilot? Do you start in a business division? It's not easy to fully integrate that. And also, circularity is one part of the bigger picture. So if you're designing products, and it's an example that is given as a good practice example, but I believe it's actually a bad practice example, the example of Fairphone. So Fairphone is a mobile phone that's designed for modularity, that you can take apart and build out on a modular basis. But, from all the conversations I've had with people, it's very bad on battery use. So as a trade-off, the energy consumption is worse. And also the product doesn't work very well. So purely designing for circularity is the wrong direction. We need to look at all the trade-offs and balance that. So we need to be very clear that it's part of a bigger picture. And circularity is one aspect of environmental considerations in product development and design. But there are parts of Europe, I would say, there's no Dutch in the room, are there? Particularly the Netherlands, who are saying it's all circular economy, sustainable development is dead. Well, certainly not my view. I see circularity as a part of that broader sustainable development picture. So it's being clear over what you're trying to achieve is the first thing. It is complicated. You have to start somewhere. The reality is I'm seeing more startups that are picking up circularity in different ways. But I was just talking to one of our graduates who I didn't know about, but he ended up being in the Financial Times, and he developed a new material that you could use in services for, in kitchens for worktops, that's using waste coffee grounds. He's built his prototype, he's secured his supply chain, but he's still struggling to commercialize it. And so if you've got these new startup companies, also the Pinatex guys, it's very difficult as a small company to commercialize new materials. So, is it better that you then embed those materials into unique products? So maybe they shouldn't be the guys who are developing vegan leather from the pineapples. Maybe they shouldn't be developing a materials company. Maybe they should be developing a product branding company. Maybe this guy should be thinking about developing a building, some sort of interior design materials company rather than purely a materials company. So I'm seeing that just from personal experience. How you're going to commercialize some of these new innovations is going to be tricky. Because materials companies, for example, need a lot of resources, very difficult. You've got to change things on scale unless you somehow get, customer buy-in through the supply chain. So so there's still the classic issues, just in closing there, from my experience, and I worked with 600 micro SMEs, more in the eco-innovation side. The two big challenges that those startups have are the money to start up the business and how to commercialize the business. So how to sell the products. They're often got a good product, and their mindset is, why aren't you all coming to buy it? So what I find with a lot of those eco-innovators is they don't understand marketing 101. So they don't know how to, they don't benchmark the pricing compared to existing products. They don't know how to get the message out. They may have a good product, but have they even talked to customers or potential customers? So circular and eco-innovative businesses have got to be good businesses to survive.